Hi everybody, this is Alex Ringel from SquareNode, and today I'll be going over custom fields. Custom fields can be added across many different areas in Infusionsoft, but today as an example, we'll be going over adding custom fields to client information. Custom fields can be accessed by going to the main navigation bar and selecting Settings in the admin area. At the top, you'll see a drop-down where you can select which area you'd like to modify. We'll just be working with contact fields today. This is the screen where you can add and modify custom fields. Fields are arranged in a hierarchical order, with tabs being first, followed by headers, and then the fields. Let's look at an example to understand this more. In client information, you'll have a first name field, which is underneath a general information header, which is inside a general tab. This is how the hierarchy is ordered. Today I'm going to be creating all of our custom fields under a new tab and a new header called example tab and example header, which I've already created. And I'm simply going to go through what's required to add a new field. So if you click add, you'll be asked to name your field and choose what type it is. Now on this drop down box, you'll see there are many different types of fields available to you. Clicking one will let you know if there's any additional setup required. For example, a list box needs to be given options, and so does a drop down. But I'm not going to go through all of those specific details now. All I'll do is I'll make one example of each and then come up with a list of good scenarios and cases in which you might use those. And you'll notice when you create the field, down here under advanced options is where you can select the tab and the header that they will list under. And there's those two that I created earlier. Okay, so here I am in one of our client records, and you'll see along the top there is our example tab that I've made earlier. If I go ahead and click on that, you'll see that I've got my example header and all of the custom fields that I've made, with the title matching the type of field it is. For example, the email field, I've given the title email just so that it helps us go through and see what we're looking at. Okay, first up, the currency field. All this does is it ensures that it has to be a numerical entry, and it simply formats it with a dollar symbol and with a decimal point. The date field. This is given a calendar entry button. Clicking on that will allow you to click on a date, which populates the date in the proper format. Date and time is very similar, but it also has a time drop-down. Day of the week is a drop-down populated with every day of the week. A drill-down menu has groups and subgroups, all of which are completely customized by you, and this just helps to organize and group what the user is selecting. An email entry will check to see if an email address has the correct characters and formatting, and also once it's saved, an email button will actually appear just here, which will let you email that address with one click. All of which is logged through Infusionsoft as well. This is great for adding more than 3 email addresses per client, which is a restriction at first, but by adding email fields you can add as many emails associated with that client as you wish. A month entry is simply a drop down with every month. Now a list box is a list of items which allows multiple entry. That's very important because if you have a list of options that you want to allow multiple entry for, only the list box allows this. So by holding Control, I can click on many of these and it will save those 3 as being selected. A name entry simply plugs into the search system in Infusionsoft. For example, I can type either my full name there, or I could have made 2 fields, one called first name and one called last name, and typed the appropriate names in there, and that will be searchable through Infusionsoft as a name. Whole number is very self-explanatory, as is decimal number, and percentage is the same. All it does is format whatever number you put in there with decimal points and a percentage sign at the end. Phone number is not particularly useful outside of the US, as it formats phone numbers to the correct format, but only in US standard format. So keep that in mind. Radio buttons are similar to other list options, for example the list box. However, they force the user to only be able to put in one answer. You'll notice here, it's actually switching away from my previous selection. A drop-down field is actually very similar to a radio field. It just looks different. So you'll see here, there are my 3 options, and I can only select one. Selecting another one overwrites it. But it takes up less space in this list format, whereas a radio button has all the options visible to the user at the one time. The social security number field is pretty irrelevant outside of the US. For your information, it actually encrypts the data that users put in there, which is great, but once again, it's pretty useless outside of the US. As is the state field, sadly, because you'll notice it's actually only full of US states at this stage. However, to get around this, I'll show you in a minute, I'd recommend simply making your own custom drop-down box and filling it full of whatever states are relevant to you. A text field is pretty self-explanatory as well. It allows numbers, letters, and characters. However, it does have a restriction on the amount of characters, and you can see here, based on the length of that box, it's also suggesting that you just use it for short text entry. If you have a large amount of text that you'd like to record in a field, then they've given you a text area field, which, as you can see, is great for paragraph text. And finally, the user field plugs into Infusionsoft, and it'll give you a list of the registered users in the system. And when creating this field, it's also possible to only display certain groups within Infusionsoft, which is very, very handy. Okay, so what I've done here is I've removed some of those more obvious custom fields that are easy to understand, and I've renamed some of the other ones and put them under some newly named headers to give an example of when you'd use them in real life. So here's a little header called Sign Up Information, space for a date of when the person signed up, an extra email address field for their personal email address, how they heard about us, which allows multiple entry, reason for changing their supplier, that allows paragraph entry because that's a text area box there, who their account manager is, and their PA's name. Now remember, the name that you type in here is actually searchable. So if for whatever reason you only remember their name and not the main client's name, you can search it and it will come up with this entry here, which is great. Now under location information, I've made a great example of the drill down field. I've called it town, and you'll see that it has town names underneath the state's name. Just an example of how you can use it to group entries. Territory, I've got this as a radio button entry. This is where there are predefined answers, and you want the user to just select one of those. And although it is a bit redundant in this case, because we've already got the town entry, which has the states listed there, we have a state drop-down box, and you'll see it does in fact contain Australian states, which is perfect. And this can be customized no matter what your location. Now keep in mind that when we created these custom fields initially, we selected contact, but you're able to add custom fields for any category within Infusionsoft, which means you can customize it to suit your business's needs perfectly. And if you'd ever like to get a full written overview of all the different fields and what they can do, when you're adding a field, all you need to do is click on which field type should I use, and that will take you to the help file where you can read through all of the information. If you have any questions about what I've gone over today, or if you'd like to know how SquareNode can help out your business, check out squarenode.com.au.